Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Chov Dalid Amud Beis, the third line from the top. In summation, the Gemara just completed two daf of explaining where do we know the source that when something is Asr Ba'achila, it's Asr Behana unless stated otherwise. And therefore there are two places specifically where we find it's Asr Ba'achila, Lo Ye'ochel, teaching me also that it's Asr Behana. Place number one is Chometz on Pesach. And the second place we find that is Shor HaNiskal. Now, where do we find the source? The Gemara brings four different sources. The first source is Rabbi Chizkiah. Chizkiah states, when it says Lo Ye'ochel, because it states it in the passive form, instead of saying Lo Yoichal, it comes to include an Isser of Hana as well. The second source is Rabbi Abo, the way he explains the sheet of Rabbi Meir. Since it says in the Isser of Nevela, Lo Soichlu, you shall not eat the Nevela, it then goes on to mefaret in the pasuk a heter of Hana. He learns from there that since it had to then mefaret a heter of Hana, must be that normally when it says Lo Soichal or Lo Soichlu or Lo Yoichal, it not only means as Aser Be'achila, it also includes to be an Isser of Hana as well. The third Mokar, place where we find the source for this, is Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, that it says in regards to Treifa, it says Bekelev Tashlichu Oisoi. There the pasuk that says Bekelev Lekelev Tashlichu Oisoi comes to include that you should go ahead and throw the treifa to the kelev, mikelev tashlichun oisoi, to it you shall throw, but other isurin you shall not. Dahainu, there's an isur hana. From oiso we learn out the isur hana both by chometz on Pesach as well as shor haniskal. The fourth and final source for where we know they're asur bahana is what really Yoshua ben Levi came to say, and Rabbi Papa come to explain his words. And that is from the pasuk that we're bringing now. That pasuk states, "Ve'habasar asher yiga bekol tamei lo ye'ochel ba'esh yisarif." There it states lo ye'ochel, and then it says ba'esh yisarif, to where we will learn that lo ye'ochel is superfluous, coming to teach me not for this pasuk, but in regards to the iser of Achila and Hana by Chometz on Pesach and Shor Niskal. Since there states Lo Ye'ochel, we don't need it for an Isser Achila, we use it for Isser Hana. Now the Gemara brings this pasuk again and shows another Isser where we learn out from this. Ve'habasa sheyiga bekol tamei lo ye'ochel. The Reisha Lamali. Why does it say Vahabasar in the Reisha? It should say Habasar. The extra Vav seems to be superfluous. In regards to the Basa that shall not, that comes in contact with Tameh, it says you shall not eat, you should burn it. Why does it say Vahabasar? Explains the Gemara, L'rabois eitzim u'levona. Even though eitzim, wood, and levona, frank incense, are not themselves oichel, it nonetheless is included in the Isser when they are put on the Mizbeach, such things, when it comes in contact with Tuma. Also, we learn from here the same Isurim as Bosar, that it has to be destroyed as well. Vehabosar, in the latter part of this pasuk, it goes, Vehabosar kol tohor yoichal bosar. Again, the Gemara asks, over here, Vehabosar kol tohor yoichal Basar, the Seifa Lamali. Why does it say Veha Basar again, the additional Vav? What does it come to include? L'rabos emurin. It comes to include the sacrificial parts of the offering. Ask the Gemara, emurin. It comes to include emurin, the word Veha Basar. Mehasam nafka. But we learn out the inclusion of emurin from a different verse. The Tanya states in the Braisa, Veha nefesh asher toichal basar. Mizevach hashlomim asher laHashem. The pasuk goes on to say, "V'tumasoi alav, v'nichasoi hanefesh ahi me'ameho." So over here, the Gemara says in the Braisa, teaching me that L'rabos is ha'emurim. It comes to include emurim, the sacrificial parts. So how can you tell me that the previous pasuk comes to include emurim? We learn it from this pasuk. Answers the Gemara, the two psukim are talking about two different things. Hasam tumas haguf bekares, hacha betumas basar balav. In the latter pasuk that we just quoted, there it's talking about where a person himself is tahor, and he comes in contact by eating the basar that's tamei. Then it states in that pasuk, who eats from a zevach hashlomim, asher laHashem v'tumas alav. He is in a state of tuma and he eats basar shlomim. Then it states that he is chayiv kares, whereby the Bryce is coming to say that includes all the emurim as well. If he is in a state of tuma and he eats emurim, he will also equally be chayiv kares. Whereas the original pasuk that we brought over here, that's stating in a situation where the basar itself becomes tamei. When a person eats, in his state of tahara, eats the basar tuma, there it's saying he's chayiv malkis, whereby the brisa comes to include if he eats also, not only basar, but the emurin, he will also be chayiv malkis. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Abo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol isurin shebat Torah ein loikin aleihen ela derech achilasan. All of the isurin shebat Torah that talks about a person is chayiv for eating them, there's an iser prohibition of achila. It's only that he's going to be chayiv if it's derech achilasan, the normal way of eating. Limu'ute mai asked the Gemara, what does this come to exclude? Omar Rav Shimi bar Ashi lemiute she'im ochal chelev chai shepoter. This comes to exclude a case where you were to eat chelev, which is osir be'achila. If you were to then take the chelev, which is normally cooked, and he then eats it raw, then he's going to be poter. That would be an example that we're talking about. That's not derech achilasan. Ika da'amre, there's another version that's not talking about merely the iser of achila, but when it says lo soichal, it's talking about also an iser of hana. For example, it says the following: Ika da'amre, Omar bi'abo, Omar bi'yochanan, kol isurin shebat Torah, ein loikin alem ela derech hana asan. All of the isurin shebat Torah that say shor haniskal, there it's not only asur ba'achila when it says lo ye'achil. We learned already before it's also asur bi'hana. So what does it come to include? Limi'ute mai. What does it come to exclude rather? When it says that you're going to then only be us, it's only going to be chayiv when he eats it or uses it derech hana asan. Omar Rav Simi bar Ashi limi'ute she'im hiniach chelev shel shor niskal al gabe makosa shehu poter. There, if a person were to take chelev, again, which is normally burnt or used to smear onto one's leather, and instead he uses it by putting it as a refuah on his makkah. So here, that's an unusual type of usage. Normally, again, it is burned or smeared on the leather. So that would then be considered to be something that's not derech hana asan. He would not be chayiv, he'd be poter. The kol shekain, how much more so, oichel chelev chai shu poter, where it's completely not a proper use. There, nobody would want to then eat such a thing. And if he eats chelev chai, certainly it's not derech hana asan. Itmar Nam, we also have a statement. Omar Rav Acha bar Avia, Omar Rav Asi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, hiniach chelev shel shor haniskal al gabe makosei poter. Lefi shekol isurin shebator ein loikin alem ela derech hanasan. So we have a similar statement that was made that Rabbi Asi said in the Rabbi Yochanan, that again, since it's not derech hanasan, when a person takes the fat of the chelev and he puts it on his makkah, since that is not considered to be the normal usage of chelev, here he's using it for derech refuah. Normally, again, chelev is burnt, or and cooked, or it's used to smear one's leather. That is the normal usage, and here he would be poter because not derech hana asan. Omar Rabbi Zeira af anan nami tanina. Rabbi Zeira says we also learn this in the following Mishnah. Ein soif gines ha'arboim mishum orla ela al hayotzim nazeizim na'anavim bilvad. We know orla is not only asur be'achila, it's also asur be'hana, as we learned on Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. V'ilu, and still, when it comes to then the juices of the orla, we said is the first 3 years that a fruit is growing on a tree, a new tree. That orla, if it's going to be not only the fruit, but it will be then the mashkin of zeisim ve'anovim, both the oil or the wine or the grape juice from the grapes, that will also carry upon it an iser of orla, whereby he'll be chayiv malchus. However, v'ilum with tutim tainim v'imonim loy. But when a person juices figs or strawberries or pomegranates, then he will not be chayiv malchus for the orla. What's the reason why this distinction? Is it not because, like we're saying before, this is not derech hana'asan? People normally use olives and grapes for their mashke, and therefore they're squeezed, a wine press and an olive press. However, when it comes to these other fruits, they're not normally used for that purpose of their mashke, and therefore it's not derech hana'asan. That's why it would not be chayiv malchus. And l'char, we would have a proof to what we're saying before. That which is not derech hana'asan is potter. Omar le'abai, Abai says you have no proof from this Mishnah. Why? Because over here it's different. If you brought me an example of a fruit that you don't normally cook, for example, let's say a cucumber, so then it's not a derech hana'asan, then you would not get malchus. Or in this case, cucumber might be a good example because we're talking about orla, but let's say a fruit from the tree that is, let's say a nut that is cooked, a walnut that is cooked. That's not a derech hana'asan for the walnut, and therefore that would be an example. But here it's different. Elohacha mishum dezeir ba'almahi. Here the juice, the mashke of things like the fig, pomegranate, or the strawberries, those are things that are considered to be zeya ba'alma. It's not considered to be the fruit itself, and therefore it's not even included in the prohibition of orla altogether. Whereby you have no proof over here. That's not because of derech hana'asan that it's not going to be chayiv. Here it's not even considered to be the orla whatsoever, since it's not the fruit of the orla, it's zeya ba'alma.